Yeah, so let me know once the recording has started.
Good to go.
Okay, so I think many of you already know Jerry was the first investor in Instabase when we had no product, nothing. We met and he decided to put some money in. I lost my bike while I was trying to raise money from Jerry. That was also a borrowed bike. And since then, Greylock has been a big supporter, and Jerry himself. So he agreed to basically do this with us to just help us understand the broader market, what is happening, what he is saying, and some of those things. But maybe what would be really, really good to start with is, Jerry, if you want to introduce yourself.
Great. Well, thank you, Anant, and thank you everybody for taking the time this morning. Like Anant said, I'm a super happy investor to be part of the journey of Instabase from the earliest days when Anant, came by for the seed round to now. You can find me if anyone needs me. I'm just Jerry, Jerry at Greylock.com, and at Jerry Chen on Twitter. So I just want to say, first and foremost, one of the partners here, before this, spent almost 10 years at VMware, from 200 employees to 15,000 different product roles. I invest in everything from enterprise software to SaaS applications, like Blend, one of our customers, to Cato Networks in the cloud, to Rockset in the data space. But I want to say open, but like, hey, this is kind of the third correction in the market in my professional career. I was a young investor at Accel during the dot-com crash. I saw the craziness of the dot-com days in the fall. I was an executive at VMware during the 08-09 recession, on the other side of the table as an operator trying to figure out what's going on during the global financial crisis. And now, obviously, as an investor and board member during 2020, what we're seeing this COVID-19 crisis. And it goes without saying that this is an unusual circumstance. So first and foremost, I hope everyone on the phone is healthy and happy, and your families are too. And I mean that because we've had engineers in a couple other companies come down with COVID-19 confirmed cases, and knock on wood, they're all recovering well. But it's both economic crisis in terms of the market's down, a bunch of people are filing for unemployment. It's a healthcare crisis in terms of people are getting sick and people are dying, our healthcare system being stressed out. And thirdly, which is probably less talked about, is kind of this weird social mental health crisis that we're all isolated in our homes, right? Like, I haven't had a conversation with anybody that not through a Zoom screen in 2.5 weeks. And my social skills weren't great to begin with, but in 3 months after this, I can only speak to you through an iPad or something in 3 months. So if I don't make eye contact with you when you see me, just blame COVID-19. And I think it goes without saying that a lot of people are stressed and scared, but it's universal. Everyone in the world is going through this, and every one of our portfolio companies is seeing the same impact of COVID-19. That said, I will say downturns and crises are actually opportunities for growth and acceleration. I think as Winston Churchill has said, like, let no crisis go unwasted or unused, right? And it means that companies that actually invest and come out of a recession or a correction in a stronger place distance themselves from the rest of the field, and they actually build better companies. And we see a lot of the best companies in 2003, 2004, Google was started, right, out of the dot-com crisis. Facebook came out a few years later, right, in the 04, 05 timeframe. And so we're seeing like a lot of these downturns are actually a great time to invest into people, invest in acquiring customers, because there's less competition, there's fewer dollars chasing the market, and you can differentiate yourself by investing strategically in different areas. And so I think, it's an opportunity because everyone else is kind of scared and worried. But if you can differentiate yourself, like every phone call you make to a customer, every email response to another engineer, another partner, you can actually, distance yourself from the rest of the field in a time of recession. So I think it's actually a great opportunity. As an investor, as a board member, when I was at VMware, we actually took advantage of the downturn in 08, 09 to actually invest in our customers, ship new products, and build a foundation where the company is today. So, I'll pause there. There's a bunch of questions I think people will talk about the market, about investing, about startups, about navigating the time frame. But I just want to open with that and say, like, I'm glad everyone is healthy, and please wash your hands. We're going to be like this for a while, but let's figure out how to get through this together.
Yeah, so I think we collected a couple of questions and people can ask anytime, but I had some, and basically maybe I'll basically start with some of those. You talked about the sort of the opportunity that it opens for some companies, and I think in some of the brief chats that we had, you talked about like how we can leverage some of the, this is the like this situation for recruiting, for sales. So yeah, I would love to double click on like what you're seeing in the broader market, kind of and in companies previously in 2008, 2001, like leverage these situations to become stronger, especially given the kind of cash situation and some of those things we are in. So we can definitely invest.
So let's talk about the sales situation first and then the recruiting thing. So there are two parts of that question. And under sales, I'll talk about what the broader market we're seeing across the portfolio and out there in general, and then talk about Instabase specifically. So on sales, if you're enterprise software, and there's most companies are down. There's like weird consumer things like gaming and Discord and Roblox are doing well for obvious reasons. But a lot of enterprise companies that are direct sales to the CIO or VP, what we're seeing across the board is POCs getting pushed out 30, 60, 120 days, right? And we've told all our companies the expectation is Q2 is going to be a complete disaster, because it's not that companies are going bankrupt, because unlike 08, 09 was a liquidity crisis and people didn't have cash to like meet debt obligations or payrolls, the economy was in fundamentally good place before COVID-19. And so what this recession is going to be caused by a lot of unemployment, especially SMBs, and a lag of consumer demand. There was a supply chain shock earlier when China went offline, but most of the recession is going to be demand side and the consumer side. But a lot of the large enterprises have good balance sheets, a lot of cash, and healthy business models. But people are uncertain. And what's happening is people have no idea when the economy is going to come back, when COVID-19 is actually going to be behind us. So there's good news, bad news there. The good news is, unlike other economic recessions like 08, 09, people didn't know when it was over, right? People didn't know when, like, hey, things are fixed, the economy's better, like the mortgage crisis is done. Because this is a weird healthcare crisis that caused the economic crisis, when the recession or there's a healthcare treatment or a vaccine in 12 or 18 months, we're going to know that the healthcare issue is behind us. And that's actually kind of very new. And then we have to deal with the broken parts of the economy. And so because people don't know when the first part, the healthcare issue, is going to be fixed, there's a lot of indecision and waiting. So we're seeing across the portfolio, Q2 is going to be kind of a really rough time because people are just delayed. They're pushing off purchases and they're tightening their budgets and belts. And so they're basically waiting to shop. And we're looking and telling our portfolio companies to forecast anywhere from 25% to 50% down in their original plans. We're saying, hey, prepare for the worst, hope for the best. There are some companies that I'm involved with, like Cato Networks, that's actually going to see a boom in their business because of what they do. But we're telling all our companies, say, prepare for the worst, hope for the best. And by prepare for the worst is for the sales models, start building into assumptions like, hey, if your sales cycle was 6 months or 9 months, assume it'll be a year. If your sales cycle is 30 days, assume it'll be 60 days. If your win rate was 40%, assume it'll be 20%. So just be conservative in the model on how you're planning, because that's part of preparing for the worst. Now, that's the situation we're seeing in the market. Now, what you can do as Instabase, because you guys are actually in a very unique position, because A, you have product market fit like we've never seen before. You have wealthy customers that have a lot of budgets, so they're not going away. And actually, a lot of the banks are getting stronger because interest rates are now zero, right? So their cost of doing business as a bank has gone down because the cost of capital is very low. And thirdly, they actually are going to probably consolidate. So we see coming out of recessions, the big customers tend to consolidate and get more strength. But the problem is, how do you get attention from your individual sponsors? And when there's a recession or there's an economic correction, people are busy putting out fires or worried about their own jobs. So you have to do things like reduce the friction to get in there. So we're seeing like longer POCs, lower prices. We're seeing deals like, hey, payment terms are advantageous. You can pay me in 12 months or 18 months, but let's make this a 3-year deal, 4-year deal, right? So before it was like, hey, pay me 9 days up front, let's charge this price. In order to get people and not lose deals, we're seeing folks get creative on longer POCs for free, smaller products. Like I know you guys are creating this app store for a smaller unit value. So how can we insert a product at a lower price point, lower friction, just make it easier? And then things on payment terms to be creative, like, hey, we'll give you, payment terms of pay us in 12 months or 18 months, but extend your purchase criteria, to 1 year as well, or 2 years. And so I think if you can use your balance sheet as Instabase strategically, how could be super aggressive right now and get every customer running Instabase in some form or fashion by being super friendly on terms or price, being super aggressive on sales, but not in an auction way. It's like, say, hey, we can help you save money. This is a time where you have budget constraints. This is a time where you don't know if you can hire people. Instabase saves you money, reduces your cost of headcount. We're going to make you look like a hero. I think I've said this not multiple times, and Barry probably knows this. The first rule of enterprise sales is don't get the customer fired, right? Whatever you do, make sure the product works, make sure the customer does get fired for buying Instabase, right? That's why they buy IBM. The second rule of enterprise sales is make the customer a hero. And so in a world where it's a recession, customers are trying to get conservative and they don't want to take a bet on a startup. So do everything you can to make sure they're still going to make a bet on a startup like Instabase. The second thing is have your customer look like a hero, because look, if they can save money, cut costs, they're going to get promoted. So that's on the sales side. I'll touch quickly on the recruiting side. So I think it's a great time to recruit, because all of a sudden what happens, there'll be category employees that are risk averse or go to the big companies. They're not meant for startup life anyway, right? They'll go back to Google, Facebook, or Salesforce. But there's a bunch of people who want to be in a startup, be in smaller companies, but now every other startup they're competing for talent with will probably have a hiring freeze for the next 6 months, next 12 months. So there's going to be a bunch of talent of people who are either laid off, they're very good, B, want to get a startup, but there's hiring freezes across the board. If you're hiring, you can now have your pick of talent, and you're not competing with 4 or 5 companies anymore, right? You might be competing with a big cash offer from Microsoft, but that person wasn't going to be like a startup person anyway. But people who want to do good startup talent, your competition has just gone away because they don't have the same cash position that Instabase does. So I think it's a great time to recruit aggressively, because A, you have great customers, a great platform. You're going to be around for the next 3 or 4 years because of the cash you're generating, and there's less competition to recruit good talent.
Yeah, I just wanted to open up for any question from salespeople or anybody before I get into other topics. But yeah, I would just open it for anybody from the company before we move away from this topic.
People can use the chat screen as well if it's hard to raise a hand or something. That probably usually works.
I think just speak.
Or speak.
Hey Jerry, this is David.
Hey David, how are you, man?
Hey, good. How are you? Yeah, I was curious to know what you thought about the lag on let's say post COVID type demand, and how you think about modeling that.
Yeah. We've spent the past 2-3 weeks talking with a bunch of bankers and economists. I can ping you later, Davey. We want to see some of those reports. You've probably seen a bunch in the news. Like you've heard things like the V-shaped correction, the U-shape, right, in terms of recession, or God forbid, an L-shape where the economy just is broken. I don't think it's a V-shape. I don't think we're going to bounce back quickly. The bull case, David, is you look at Asia and APAC, and they're bouncing back quickly. And cheap oil actually helps China. And so actually one thing that's interesting for Instabase, because you have customers in Asia, increasing exposure to customer in Greater China, Japan, Taiwan, Singapore is actually probably a good thing, because those economies are going to bounce back faster than Western economies. And so that's a neat thing. That's a slight tweak in this market, that if you have customers or stocks with customers more exposure to APAC, will actually bounce back faster. So that may be a slight mod of how you think about sales. The earliest we think the economy is going to come back in any shape or form is probably Q4 2020, David. And by back in strength, we don't mean slight recovery. We mean functionally again, people are hired, people are working. Q4 is probably the earliest. We're probably thinking Q1 and Q2 2021. For a bunch of the rest of the portfolio, we're telling all our companies to try to fund themselves, cut burn to get to Q1, Q2 2021, because we think Q4 2020 is the earliest, more likely first half of 2021. And what's going to happen is it's mostly SMB, it's certain sectors like hospitality and travel, they're just destroyed. What you're going to also see is the big companies recover faster, right? Because like I said earlier, they have cash and they have balance sheets. Big tech is going to come out of this stronger than ever, right? They have Amazon, Microsoft, Google, Facebook, even Apple, despite supply chain issues. they're going to recover faster than the rest. So to the extent like Instabase is selling into larger customers and bigger customers, those folks recover quickly. You're going to see in Q3, Q4 2020 a lot of tech M&A, a lot of M&A in general, but you see a lot of tech M&A especially because all the big tech companies have a bunch of cash and they've been waiting for the stock prices for these startups or other companies to go down for 5 years. So you're going to see a lot of consolidation probably back half of this year. You'll probably see the economy really hopefully coming back Q1, Q2 2021 is kind of the most likely case. There is a bear case scenario that it really takes a long time to end of 2021 before things get back to normal. And there's a bunch of reasons because the healthcare stuff isn't fixed completely. There's like, it's actually the impact our hospital system because of COVID-19 really breaks a bunch of things fundamentally. The jobs that went away, like 3 million people filed unemployment, they don't get hired back right away. You know, there's mass unemployment. And a bunch of the restaurants and small, medium businesses that we all know are going on business at SF, they stay out of business, right? For sure, the small, medium hospitality industry in our cities are changed completely. But I would say this is fast moving. Like every 30 days, every 2 weeks, we're getting new data. If for some reason, like, you know, this malaria drug actually solves the problem around COVID-19, you'll see things bounce back faster. But under the best data we have, we're probably looking Q4 the earliest, most likely first half 2021, with a good chance actually that it goes longer to like second half 2021. But you know, we revisit this every 30 days.
Got it. Cool. Thanks, Jerry.
Any other question?
Hey, Jerry, this is Nakul. Question on, you brought up tech M&A. Given our balance sheet, that's something that we should have an opportunity to look at as well. So I'm curious to get your thoughts on, what kind of acquisitions make sense? And then second is, how do we think about timing, given that no one knows whether it's an L, U, or a V?
Yeah, I would say, okay, for Instabase, I would say tech M&A makes sense, right? But I mean, don't do M&A for M&A's sake. Everything on the call is most tech M&A fails, right? The reason why you buy another customer more likely a startup is one, you're buying their customers, right? Two, you're buying into a net new product area or a new market. And a new market could be a different type of business, a different vertical, a different geography. Or third, you're buying a company for talent or technology that accelerates your roadmap, right? So one, you find a customer that has a installed base, you just want the customers. Two, you buy a company that has something healthcare, something in China, or something completely different. I don't know, you want to get into online gaming space. Or three, the most common at start is you're buying talent technology that really accelerates or completes your own roadmap. So I would say those are 3 ways to think about it. For someone like Instabase, it's probably the third, maybe the second, but most likely the third. Definitely not the first, because you're not necessarily in the business of buying customers. And I think the way to think about it is, it's a long conversation how to have a sponsor, how to make sure it's accretive in terms of accelerating the roadmap or finishing the technology. But those are kind of the diligence questions you want. And I think timing is probably, I would say Q3. I think opportunistically, you might see things in Q2 happen, but I think no one's doing any deals right now. First, I think it's impossible to get a feel of a team or a person over Zoom, right? It's just many Zoom calls like Dave and I had, you won't have it. I mean, if I know you guys, like Ashish, Dave, and Anant, I've known for years, I can buy one of their companies because, I've seen them face to face. If I've never met someone like, Mendy before, it might be a great Zoom call. I think it's going to be hard to do any acquisitions over Zoom. But I would say Q3, Q4 probably is the opportunity time to think about it. Because I think a lot of companies will be hurting for cash, and either A, they can't get financing for VCs, or B, the financing from a VC firm would be such a down round, these valuations are low, that it makes more sense for them to sell out.
Any other question?
There were 2 in email I can address 2 now or later, Anant, that Mendy sent over.
Hey, Jerry, just a quick follow-on to the question about M&A. From a VC perspective, is it the same kind of thing where you'll see VCs potentially doing follow-on deals or company deals that they already know, but not maybe new investments? Or how will that change?
Yeah, I think for sure. I mean, look, I was a VC at askSpoke.com days, and it was on the side in 08, 09. So what's going to happen in a downturn is either one, a company needs the cash, right? Because they're running out. And so the VCs will put it in because there's nowhere else to go, and the VC still believes in it. Or two, what you see in most corrections in a lot of portfolios of a VC, they have like 20 or 30 companies. A handful don't work as usual. More than a handful don't work in a recession, but a handful are working. Right there, because it's pretty obvious in a recession. What happens is the shit gets flushed down per my language fast, and the good ones rise to the top. And you'll see VCs plow more money into the ones that are working proactively, right? Because one, they think they can get a better deal because the valuations are down, and two, these are the 7 companies in the portfolio of 30 that are really working. Let's put more money behind it, because once a VC fund does their deals, they can't get out and do more deals unless it's a new fund. So you're going to see a lot of VC firms double down in their own companies, and I've already seen that in 2 companies I'm involved in. The insiders, Greylock included, are bullish on it. We're leading an inside round to put more money in the company because we think it'll be one of the few winners coming out of the recession.
Jerry, I have a question on the people side. So you have some CEOs like Mark Benioff that are encouraging, not to lay off people during these times. We're actually in a position where we need to be growing exponentially right now.
Yeah.
How have you seen times of economic downturn? How have you seen companies really rise to the occasion from a people perspective, and what can they do to make sure that their people are learning, growing, taken care of during these kinds of times?
Yeah, it's interesting. So let's talk about people in a recession. Now, there's people who are laid off, and when you think about layoffs and how that stress that creates. There's also hiring people. There's also thriving for people in the companies during a trying time. So, I think what Benioff's doing at Salesforce is great. One, again, he's using his balance sheet, the cash, to attract and keep talent. I mean, he's doing a great thing. These people, not laying people off for 90 days is just a great thing in general. When people are worried about the jobs, it's good for the employees, it's good for the tax base, it's good for the government, right? Because it's paying payroll taxes. But that's an example of a big tech company with a good balance sheet saying, look, I'm not going to fire anybody. If you want a safe job, come to Salesforce. And so I think it's great. He's going to attract more talent because of that. I mean, I think it's brilliant. So I think in startups that have to go through layoffs, and layoffs aren't actually a bad thing because there's always a performance thing in good times and bad times. And so in general, there are layoffs for people performance. There's layoffs because people aren't good fits. And in general, you're always trying to tweak the talent you have. And that's an ongoing process, right? In good and bad times. I think a recession happens is people are stressed, but this is basically when you actually grow for a couple of reasons. It's easy to be we call it, Horace calls the wartime CEO. It's easy to be a wartime CEO in good times when there's plenty of money, plenty of resources. But the times you grow the most professionally are one, you actually have to make tough decisions in resource constraints. So I think everyone who's in a company that's healthy and growing in a time of constraint is actually 10x in the experience curve. Because one, they're learning how to play the game of growing a startup in hyperscale with an environment where everyone is stressed, there's fewer dollars to go around, the cost of capital is higher, but yet they're able to make bets. And what I've said in the earliest opening conversation is how you invest in a recession is 3 or 4x more important than how you invest in a boom time. What I mean by that is I don't mind my companies investing or spending money on hiring or sales and marketing, but I'd rather see the founders, CEOs I work with concentrate their bets. Because in a good time when cost of capital is low, you can invest in a bunch of different projects, different initiatives. You can hire a bunch of different people, and it's all noise. But every engineer you hire, every feature you release, every salesperson you put in the market now is 2 or 3x what it was beforehand. Because every other company is pulling back, right? They're actually decreasing investment, decreasing spending. So every dollar, every initiative you launch in a recession actually stand out from the crowd. And so every engineer, every customer success rep, every ops rep, every finance individual, everything you do in a downturn is heightened because the waterline is below. And so what happens is you get more visibility to Mendy. So everyone sees what you're doing. You the impact of what you're doing from a sales point of view, a support point of view, an engineering point of view is heightened. It's 3 or 4x. And so to the extent there's more pressure, but pressure also accelerates your career, right? And so in a good time, a rising tide floats all boats. were you a great manager? Were you a great product manager? Or were you just lucky in a bull market? I think in a time like this, the people who are super talented, you're going to see accelerate their careers. So I think it's a great platform to be in, like Instabase, where you have a chance to make a big dent on the market and really accelerate your careers, because you were at a company that actually came out of the recession much better versus hiding out of Facebook or Google or Salesforce, where you get lost in 20,000 people. If you at a crappy company, you disappear as well. But if you can be a key individual in a company that makes a dent, that just shows how much more talented you are. That pays off over the rest of your career.
Awesome. Shall we go to one of the questions that came in prior to?
Yeah, so there's two. One was on pricing at VMware. How we think of price for something new. Second was around open source. So first on the VMware pricing, so VMware pricing, philosophy of pricing, as Anant and everyone else knows, I think about frameworks, right? So first, let me give you a framework on pricing, and then open source. So pricing, as Barry knows, has to be scalable, right, and easy to understand for the customer. And a lot of startups screw up and fail early for two reasons. One, they pick the wrong customers, and the wrong customers leads you down a suboptimal path. Or two, they don't pick the right pricing mechanism, the right unit of value, and basically it doesn't scale. And as Anant knows, I have these blogs. One's called, I think, unitvalue.com, that talks about how I think about pricing. And VMware made the decision early to scale on cores or CPUs, right? And so the reason why they did that is the more CPUs you had, the more cores, the more VMs you could run in the early days. I'll talk about the transition a bit. Number two, the reason why we chose cores or CPUs in the early days is because it was familiar to the customer. Customers were buying servers on a per core, per socket basis, like how many sockets in this Dell or HP server, right? How many CPUs were here? And we didn't want to blow their mind by offering them a pricing on power metric gigahertz. Like notoriously Oracle, I think 15, 20 years ago, tried to charge their databases on get megahertz of power, wattage of power consumption, because they figure the more power you consume for the database, the more value you're getting. Of course, what happens with pricing, there's unintended consequences. So if you price a database on wattage consumed, guess what? You write a pretty shitty database that basically consumes a lot of power, and customers freaked out because they had no idea how to measure it. So customers want something familiar. Customers want something predictable, right? They can forecast and plan how many sockets, how many CPUs I wanted. So that's how VMware priced in early days. Now, what happened in the latter days of VMware, the value wasn't tied to cores. The value was tied to cores and memory. And what happened was, with Moore's law, the number of power of your cores doubled every 18 months, right? And the amount of RAM you can put in a server doubled every 18 months. So what happened with VMware is the value we created by virtualizing servers, the customers were getting more value every 18 months because we're pricing still per core, while those guys were basically doubling their power number of VMs every 18 months. So at some point in time, VMware tried to change from per core pricing to per gig of memory pricing, and customers revolted for a bunch of reasons. And so I think what helped VMware early was a familiarity on the per core basis, and we made a conscious decision to surrender the value of Moore's law to the customer, so they would double their value every 18 months versus us. And at some point in time, VMware tried to capture some of that value back by going to per memory pricing, and customers freaked out about it. And it goes to show you the language or the lesson. Your victims are your own business model. So your victims are your own success. So once you get customers on a per CPU pricing and whatever business model you're using, it's hard to change. And so you look, a lot of companies out there can change business models. And when you have a business model change, it's super disruptive, right? Like Microsoft sells Office on a per seat basis, and Google gives away apps for almost free and sell ads. Anyway, so that was the lesson of VMware early. It was a conscious decision to do something that scaled. It was familiar, but at some point in time, they lost a lot of value. The second question was on open source. We helped launch Cloud Foundry. So open source quickly, there's two reasons to do open source. One is a sales and marketing thing. You're trying to reduce the friction to get into your customer base, right? So like freemium trials or free downloads, open source is basically trying to reduce the friction for customers to get awareness and get trial. And that's why you would do an open source version of a database or Instabase or whatever. And also, you have to make sure this product go-to-market fit, open source matters if your customers use open source. So if you're selling something to the CFO, for example, the CFO is not going to go to GitHub and download something to do hack on GitHub over the weekend. But the engineers will. So you see things around like databases and operating systems be open source because the user, the buyer of the products are open source engineers. If your customer isn't an open source person or doesn't care about open source, then open sourcing your product doesn't really matter because like it's not going to help awareness or adoption. The other reason why I do open source is basically integration engineering benefits. So if you have a product like an operating system that needs a bunch of integrations to third-party software, open source is just an easier way to do collaboration with other companies and other technologies. That helps in the R&D side. But one of the biggest advantages for open source is advantage go-to-market, right? It basically reduces your cost of acquiring customers and awareness of the product. And so I think if that makes sense for a customer base, it's something for Instabase to think about.
Any live questions?
I think someone said something, but there might be a mute or didn't come through.
My computer is basically, I got disconnected for a few seconds. Can you hear me now? Back?
I can, yeah.
Is there any other question, follow-up question on this, the open source stuff, before we move to some other topic? Seems like none. So one of the things is so currently, like basically many of the models are based on, especially for the future economy prediction, is on when we can figure out the COVID problem. But I think the bigger issue, I guess, is what about the cascading effect that it could have if the travel and hospitality can go down? Like if you look at what is happening at TripActions or Airbnb or Marriott and all the airlines, and like what could be the cascading effect of some of those, which can affect the other companies like Microsoft or Google or banks and those?
Yeah. So obviously travel and hospitality as a vertical industry has been hurt the most. Like, you know, I, for one, have never been on a cruise. I probably would never go on a cruise after what I've seen the past month, right? So what's going to happen is, look, I think in the short run, there's cascading effects in travel and hospitality, mostly around local economies, because if people aren't traveling to like Barcelona or Madrid or Vegas or conferences like VMworld or Oracle World or Salesforce, Dreamforce are canceled, restaurants, bars, taxis, Uber drivers, all that revenue goes away. Like when Mobile World Congress was canceled in Barcelona, that was a huge deficit effect to the local economy. So tax revenue goes away, consumer spending goes down. So I think, you know, the first order effect is business and travel and hospitality. Like TripActions example, startups and big companies, Hilton is like at 14% occupancy. The airlines are just, you know, in pain. You know, supply chain to those guys are in pain. Like airline companies like Boeing or Airbus are in pain. And then I think the second order effect is the local wage owners and like restaurants and bars and travel hospitality are hurt. The bigger companies, I think, will recover faster because they just have cash. And as a customer base, like if you're a customer sells in travel hospitality, you're going to hurt. But the big companies like Microsoft, I think, be fine. I think what will happen in this market, like a lot of recessions, is travel and hospitality, especially the big companies, the airlines, are going to get a bailout, right? So if you look at the stimulus package, there's going to be a lot of money to the airlines because they're strategic. There'll be a lot of money to the travel hospitality supply chain. The cost of capital is zero, interest rates is zero. So if you're a landlord, like a hotel, you're going to refinance your loans because most of the buildings are financed through debt. So unfortunately, what's going to happen is there'll be consolidation, like all recessions. So I think the big airlines, the big hotel chains, the big travel and hospitality companies will start acquiring the smaller ones because they have cash, have capital, they'll benefit and bail out. And then they'll recover in like a year from now. Maybe not the same level as right now, but they'll recover because of low cost of capital and because of what the government's doing. But like David said before, I think it'll be 3 or 4 quarters before the secondary effects recovered. But that's why I think Q2, Q3 is going to be very, very ugly right now.
And like, you need to just have some like advice on, especially how one can be creative in pricing and can give better terms to the customer. Is there some like the practical evidence of what some companies have done in the past in these situations, where they have given like deferred pricing term or things like that to the customers to acquire them like earlier, to get the deal closed without needing to worry about money, and then use that as an advantage? Like how practical it has been in the past when people have used it.
Yeah, I think okay, so you think about sales, there's like top of funnel, middle funnel, and bottom funnel, right? We're in the deal. So I would say if you're having anything middle funnel to bottom funnel, all those tactics that I described earlier have worked in the past in terms of being creative to close the deal, right? Because what's going to happen is budgets are going to dry up or they'll get frozen. And so anything you do to say, hey, we'll be creative on financing, either cut the price or give you really beneficial terms so they don't have to pay you for a while, is good. Now, you would only do that for good customers. And so what we saw in 08, 09, and 2002 is a bunch of customers didn't pay their bills, right? Like if the customers are like, especially startups, like if you're a startup selling to other startups right now, you're probably screwed, right? Because a lot of startups will go under and they don't have any budget. In 2001, 2002, they basically just did not pay their bills. But if you have customers that are in industries that you think will recover, even like an airline, United, they're going to recover, right? If you're selling to United Airlines or Hilton, that company's not going to go away. I would be creative on terms to get the deal done. Say, don't pay me for 18 months. It'll be hell on your balance sheet as a liability, but at least get the customer closed. I think in the middle funnel, you have to be creative in drop. So that's in the bottom funnel, just terms on pricing. Middle funnel is dropping pricing, selling them a small product to get things accelerated. And then on top of funnel, I think you got to change your positioning and messaging and to around how it can save you money. How can I actually help you in a recession? So top of funnel, I think, is creative on product marketing positioning, right? The use cases, you kind of tweak it for, I think it said this to me before. We're coming from a time period where people were greedy, digital transformation, and they're motivated by greed, to a time of fear where people are afraid of their budgets, afraid about their jobs. So you have to play from the greed perspective, like, hey, I'm going to be every company wants to be a Google and be, using Instabase to change the world, to like fear. I worry about my budget. I want to use Instabase to save money, reduce costs, be more efficient. So I think at the top of the funnel, if you can, play on that fear and change the positioning, you'll get more top of funnel. Middle funnel, you have to be creative on pricing and packaging to make the unit value maybe smaller. And in bottom funnel, I think, favorable terms for the right customers will be super interesting, and it will help. Like, I know we have some portfolio companies that are selling to the airlines right now or hotel chains, and they're just saying, hey, man, pay us in 18 months, pay us in 12 months. Extend the terms from a 2-year deal to a 3-year deal, but pay us in 18 months when things are better. And that's playing very well.
Mm-hmm. Any question from the sales or customer success perspective, if anybody?
I have a question. This is Georgia. Hey, I'm on the customer success side. So I'd be curious just to hear like your perspective with current customers who might be like slowing down in activities or having issues with revenue internally. Like what are some things you think we could be doing, if it's not necessarily like on a payment term, we're not in a renewal period, just to like keep them engaged and keep them excited about Instabase? Yeah.
So this is where the hardest part in a recession or a market like this is everyone's super busy doing other things, right? And all of a sudden, I used to say to founders earlier, there's 3 hurdles for a customer. One, will they take time to listen to your pitch? Will they take time to put hands on keyboard and play with the product? And 3, will they write you a check, the ultimate sign of value? And so now you're at a time where if they're a current customer, they're ready to listen to you, they're played with it, they're signed a check, but maybe they're not using it as much as they should be, right? And so what happens is, like I said earlier, every phone call, every email you can do goes a long ways. You're now in a position where if you're a better customer service organization, customer support success organization, you have to be super proactive. Like you will now have to basically do their job for them. And in a time where they said, hey, this is the top 2 or 3 thing I want to play on Instabase, so like, I don't have time for it. You basically have to like wrap everything up in like a nice little bow, tell them how to use the Instabase, do some of the work for them, and make their job easier. And so the extent that you can actually, do your customer's job for them in some form or fashion, which is hard. It's hard to say how that looks. Just make it easier, make it so much easier to use Instabase more, or like be creative. Like, hey, have you thought about using Instabase to save money here? Or have you thought about using Instabase to get leverage on your support team or your own engineering team? And just being proactive with them, being super responsive to them, and giving them ideas on how to use Instabase to them. And the most important thing you do, Georgia, is ask them, what are the top 2 or 3 things on their mind? Like, talk to your customers. What is your number 1 priority this month, this week? Tell me about what are your biggest priorities for this quarter, or what's your biggest worries. Have that conversation, ask them what their needs are, or their projects, and then come back and say, oh, well, your project is X. This is how Instabase can help with that. And so I think the more you can do to like gather information of what's going on in your customers, and this is the whole thing of customer intimacy and customer empathy for any good customer success organization, having that conversation, it's hard to get their time, but you can get their time, have them tell you what they're working on, and then you coming back and saying like, we can help you there. That goes a long ways. And that's why like the IBMs of the world are there, because they just know their customers' business so well. They're proactive, like, hey, Big Blue will help you here. And so to the extent you can do that in a little bit, will go a long ways.
Sweet, thanks.
Any other question from sales, customer success, product?
I have a question. Hey, Jerry. Question is around revenue growth. So again, there's some assumption here, but as the market is contracting and spending power will reduce, we already have customers right now, and they are large customers. In these times, and Jerry, you've been through 3 historical downturns. In these times, would it be beneficial to spend more time on sort of land and expand type of deals, or to go after new customers? Like, can we actually expand on the existing customer, or has that historically worked, or what are your guidance on that?
It's hard, but I think, look, both have worked, right? Because in your current customers, if you have a good customer success, like George just asked, you should be expanding, right? And like, so with your current customers, how do you use this time, Ashish, to just be part of their freaking fundamental stack, right? Just like drive it to the ground, drive it everywhere, and just make sure it can't rip you out ever. I mean, that's what VMware in 08, 09, we did that, right? It's like, hey, you want to reduce costs? Virtualize everything. We're going to help you. So your current customers, that should be the focus, or customer success, and that's doable depending on your customers, depending on how much budget they have, but it's definitely doable. But I would say if you have the ability to be aggressive on acquiring new customers, landing and then expand, this is a great time to land. And landing is harder, right? Because everyone is super distracted. They don't have budget. But in a market like this, if you can land and get market share, because a bunch of the other competitors are going to go away. There'll be, they're going to have, startups aren't be funded. They're going to be less attention. If you go to more customers, hey, we've got like Standard Chartered, Goldman Sachs, Bank of America. We have all the logos. We're the safe bet for you right now, and just acquire more and more customers right now. Because if you acquire customers now aggressively when everyone else is afraid or can't sell or can't go to market, because the number one thing that's cut in a recession, sales and marketing, right? People stop spending money in marketing. That's why everyone says Facebook in the short term is going to hurt, because AdWords ad sales will be down. In the long run, it'll be fine because Facebook engagement's up. But sales and marketing is like the first thing cut in a recession because no one's buying. If you can actually acquire more customers in a market like this, they'll pay 3 or 4x in 2021 when they're out, because now you have a foothold in a bunch more customers. It's not easy, right? Because it's hard to like land grab. It's hard because you don't want to screw up your pricing structure and ruin for everybody. And it's hard because you're going to be stretched thin, because when you have more customers, your support org, your success org is stretched thin. But if you can land a bunch of customers right now, when the economy recovers, all those customers are doing better. But you got to pick the right customers, right? Don't pick the customers that go bankrupt in 2020. Pick the customers that are going to thrive in 2021.
Thanks.
Any other question before I ask one? Okay, this question is not directly related to Instabase, but there's a question some people ask, which is like, if someone has to start a company today, is it easier or harder? And what is the impact on the early stage, like seed and like would good companies start at this time? And what is the advice for if somebody wants to start a company today?
Yeah, I mean, I think, like I said earlier, some of the best companies are started in downturns, right? It's like, you know, Google's really getting its steam in 99, 2000, right? You know, and Facebook in 04, 05. Some of the best companies are started in downturns. Like Uber came out like 08, 09, you know, Great Recession after that. And so it's not for the faint of heart, because what happens in bear markets, all the what I call tourists go home, right? People that think it's easy to start a company or easy to grow because, you know, everyone's doing it, that competition goes away. So one, there's less noise. Two, there's capital becomes harder, right? Because the VCs get more discerning in a down market. But in a bull market, for every good idea, there's 13 competitors. There's 20 YC companies that look the same because they just copied your website, right? So in a down market, if you have, you know, my idea, a good idea or a good IP and a point of view of what to do in the market, it's a great time to start a company, because there's just less noise, less competition, less competition to hire talent, right? Instead of 20 machine learning startups, there'll be 3. So one, I think it's a good time. What happens is valuations are down, but you know, that's a whole different story. You can still probably raise money from a good VC at a reasonable valuation, but actually it's probably a good time to start early. Downturns are the hardest for companies that are trying to sell a lot of product, they're burning a lot of money because sales goes away. But it's actually a good time to be early because your burn is low. You're not really worried about trying to support a bunch of sales folks because you're still early, and you're just working on the product, and it gives you time and pace to operate. So I think it's actually a good time. You have the right idea. And I think VCs are still investing. Look, I think the next quarter is going to be tough because one, it's hard to invest in a new company over Zoom. Like if I know Not, so Not called me, said I'm doing another company, I give him money for a bunch of reasons. But if I've never met you before, it'll be harder over Zoom. It's going to take longer to raise money because it's over Zoom or in a downturn. It's just expected to take more and more meetings. And I think that's a good thing because you get to know the investor better and I get to know the founder. So I would say it's going to take a little longer, but you have time to operate because the pace isn't as frenetic, right? You can do it right. So I think it's actually a good time to do a company. I'm actually excited to be investing more in 2020.
And since we're running out of time, one last question, and that is, this is the first time when I think most of the company are going all working remote, and you see people just over Zoom. And so what is the, like, is there some lessons learned because you have much broader view of like what different companies have done? Is there some lesson on what works when everybody is remote and what doesn't work, and how do you keep everybody synchronized? How do you keep everyone motivated? How do you make sure that everybody's well taken care of? So it's basically how you run a company when you don't get to see people in person every day.
Yeah, I think it's the hardest thing, right? Is that isolation and stress that we're facing today. So that we're getting this mental stress now. So say couple things. The open source companies and communities have done that well because a lot of open source projects are fully distributed. You know, they're just hanging out on GitHub all day. So from a coordination and communication perspective on the product side, a lot of the open source projects have done it well. And there's pros and cons to what works in open source versus what Instabase does. But from a mechanical point of view, that matters. They've done it well. They've done that for years and years and years, right? I think for companies not necessarily open source that didn't start that way, it's just over communicating, and so it's best practice like weekly Zoom meetings, happy hours, even small things, right? So it's as a company having a time, you guys are small enough where everyone can hang out, just frequently do that. Small groups, so managers do more frequent one-on-ones or one-on-threes, just more communication like via Zoom. Thirdly, tools via Slack or Confluence or wikis, anything to over communicate on writing and communication helps. So this is a time where over communicating and just creating casual times to hang out matters. It's a time where documenting requests or information matters. And it's also a time where I know you're working on the Instabase values, where in terms of this teamwork and community of checking on each other, like, hey, Anant, how's it going? You know, half my job right now is I'll call Anant, you know, or my founders. I just check in over Zoom or text or Slack because I know it's a weird time. Also, I'm just stuck at home. So, but you know, checking on people and create a cultural norm, and it comes from all your leaders on down. Make it a cultural norm to just check on people more frequently and just over communicate. And on the flip side, kind of ruin some freaking Slack. You know, just have some patience. People are at home. They're, you know, if they have kids, they're trying to like take care of the kids at homeschool. They have, you know, cousins in New York or grandparents that are sick, and like having some empathy and cutting some people Slack helps. And so when people are miscommunicating, just have some empathy for each other. But over communicating, over documenting, and then from a mechanical point of view, I would look at some of the open source projects, what they do well in terms of coordinating engineering projects in a distributed fashion. And you guys have an Indian organization, so you've done that a little bit already on working over time zones. That's going to be the most important thing. And I would say what happens is smaller units of teams, smaller units of engineering, smaller units of sales and marketing work better in a remote fashion. It's just easier to communicate, right, versus larger teams.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Any question from the finance team, Scott? Oh, sorry, there was some question from somebody.
Yeah, it's hey Jerry, it's Jonathan. I had a question regarding that. Do you think all of this will change how companies work in the future? Like, do you think companies will become more remote, or just like become fully remote? I think there's been a trend of some tech companies going fully remote recently. Like, do you think this will accelerate that?
For sure. I think that was a trend happening already for a bunch of reasons, but I think coming out of this, a lot will change, right? So I think the way we work, I think remote's going to be, some companies do fully remote, fully distributed. I think working from home is going to be a much more common thing. So I think you're going to see a generation of tools and technologies around remote work is going to be a thing for sure for lifestyle and work. I think the consumer experiences, the way we're going to entertain ourselves is going to be changed. There'll be a bunch of new startups around remote video or collaboration. You know, you're already seeing on Instagram Live and stuff how people are entertaining themselves now. Look, I mean, Zoom's been incredible. I wish I had more of that stock or any of the stock, but Zoom did not anticipate people hanging out at dinner for 4 hours, you know, watching a movie together, right? So I think remote work's gonna be a bigger thing, and it'll be interesting to see technologies and tools coming out of it. It's not gonna be the way everything is done, but I think for sure there's a huge shift towards that for a bunch of reasons.
There is a contrarian approach, contrarian view somebody took, which is this has moved remote work at least 10 years behind than in fact moving forward, because people realize that that's not the future, because this has done more damage to remote work than good. That's what there's somebody who wrote the article on, I think, the Atlantic.
Jeff Lewis wrote this
Okay.
on Twitter. He's a venture capitalist that went to my school in
Okay.
with Seth. Larry.
Yeah. So no, I know. Yeah, I know. You know, yeah. One of our associates or principals. Look, it's weird. Even after 2 weeks, it's like almost every phone call now is via Zoom by default, right? Before we'd do a reference call on you know, an engineer or a hire, and it would be phone, be fine. But almost now it's everything by default Zoom, and you know people have to like tidy their homes, their backgrounds, or virtual backgrounds, whatever. I think it's inevitable. It's going to happen for a bunch of reasons. You know, I think a bunch of other stuff around supply chains, availability, business continuity, right? When this happens again, you know, that's all going to change. But I think more importantly, John, your customers that are in tech companies are going to do more remote, right? So think about that. So when you think about how Instabase is used and think about how you sell, increasingly your customer's going to have a continuity and operate a business continuity strategy on what happens the next time this happens. This is not the last time something like this will happen. It's going to happen again in our lifetimes. So all your customers are going to have a continuity plan for the next time this happens. A bunch of your customers are going to do more remote work, distributed work. And so thinking about how Instabase can sell into that is another product idea or a sales idea that you should be thinking about. Anyway, last thing I need to go before I have to run by 10 o'clock. Thank you so much for the time. Look, I'm super excited about Instabase. This is going to be a great time because you guys have an amazing product, a phenomenal team, and great customers. And so I'm excited. This is the time for you guys to be aggressive and double down and just do everything you are, but better, because every effort you do is going to be just highlighted more in the next 18 months. But most importantly, like, stay healthy. That's the most important thing. And if Greylock or myself can be helpful to any of you guys at Instabase, feel free to go through a knot or just ping me, Jerry at Greylock, or tweet at me at Jerry Chen. And I hope to see you guys all over Zoom again or in person one of these days.
Sounds awesome. Thanks a lot, Jerry.
Very
Jerry.
appreciate it.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Thank you.
Wash your hands.
Bye.
Friday, all.
Bye. Bye.